There's a fire sale going on in Indiana. Or so it seems. Players becoming available that maybe weren't available a couple months ago. Players that I have significant interest in. Players I tried to acquire in our Locked On NBA Ultimate Mock Draft over the summer. Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner, Karis LeVert, TJ Warren. These are names that could be on the move and names that Sacramento might have interest in. On today's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to be joined by the Locked On Pacers podcast host, Tony East. We're going to talk about what kind of package it would take to get Domantas Sabonis in Sacramento, what interest the Pacers have in potential Kings pieces. Same thing with LeVert. Same thing with Miles Turner. Can he fit next to Richaun Holmes if the Kings were to make a move for him? And what about TJ Warren? He hasn't played a game, but could he come in and be impactful? What are the question marks around him? So much to discuss. Let's see if we can negotiate some deals on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I've been a Sacramento sports media member for the last 7 years. This is my 8th season covering Kings basketball, formerly for Sports 1140 KHTK Radio and SAC, now with ABC 10 Television. And before we get into this conversation about the pieces or players potentially for trade in Indiana and what it would take for the Kings to get some of those players, my conversation with Tony East, a really good one. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Do have a little breaking news, somewhat an update for you on the status of Richaun Holmes. He did have some kind of procedure done to repair a laceration to his eye. He is not with the team. He did not travel with them to Charlotte for their game against the Hornets. No word on if he's going to be available at all during this road trip, but at least we know against Charlotte, the Kings will be without Richaun Holmes. Who will start at that 5 spot? I imagine it's going to be Tristan Thompson. That's my guess at this point in time. But like we talked about on yesterday's podcast, Bagley could make a case for getting that spot. Alex Len, depending upon matchups, he's started in that 5 spot before in his career and could be the right selection. So the Kings do have enough bigs to make up for that. But of course, everybody has to play a little bit better and be a little more dialed in against a team like Charlotte, who the Kings put up 140 points on earlier this season. Without Richaun Holmes, it's always a lot more difficult. So I hope Richaun gets well soon, gets healthy, and doesn't miss too much time, can come back, because the Kings, we know, very much need him, especially on this road trip. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, trade talks. I love trade talks. I love the hypothetical trade talks. And as the trade deadline gets closer and closer, we're still a ways out. But as the trade deadline gets closer and closer, these trade talks are just going to pick up. I expect the Kings to be very aggressive in trade conversations. So why not be aggressive here on Locked On Kings? As soon as I found out this information about Indiana getting ready to trade away the majority of their core, first thing I did was called up my guy, Tony East, Locked On Pacers, and said, hey, man, I need to have you on Locked On Kings. We need to talk about some potential deals. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast, Tony East. Every single NBA season, as we approach trade deadline time, players who we didn't expect to become available suddenly become available, and then it becomes a mad dash for the other 29 teams in the NBA to find a way to acquire said player. And for the Indiana Pacers, it sounds like a fire sale is coming. They have a lot of talent that will potentially be available at this trade deadline, and here to help me sort out some of this madness and get an idea of what it would take for the Kings to potentially acquire one or more of these players. Joining me is the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast, Tony East, back with me here on Locked On Kings. Tony, did you see this coming, or were you and Indiana Pacers fans in general surprised by this?
Yes and no. I mean, I think if you told me before the season that in December this would be popping up, I would have been very surprised. This is very early in the season for a team to consider this direction, especially right after they hire a very successful new head coach. But when the report actually came out, They were 9-16. An ugly 4-game losing streak had just finished. Clearly some fit and usage issues with the team they have on the court. Now we've even gotten more information about how Miles Turner feels about his role. So given what we know now, I would say it's not that surprising, and their record makes it not surprising when you go under 500 last year and you're 13th in the East a third of the way into the next year. No, it's not surprising in that sense, but given where this team was very recently, given where they were in the offseason, in that sense, yes, it was surprising.
So, Tony, we on the Locked On Podcast Network did an ultimate mock draft over the offseason, and you and I were in a lot of hypothetical discussions, and I was very interested in acquiring Miles Turner, and we discussed potential pick swaps and things like that. Ultimately, we were unable to get a deal done, and at that time, I didn't even try for Domantas Sabonis, even though I am a fan of his, didn't even try for Karis LeVert, didn't even try for TJ Warden. Now, suddenly, all these guys are available. And we're kind of just going to go one by one and try and gauge, at least in your mind, in the Pacers' mind, what their value is and what it would potentially take for the Kings to acquire those players. The two names that easily make the most sense for the Kings to go after are TJ Warren and Domantas Sabonis. I still like Miles Turner a lot, but with Rashawn Holmes here, it wouldn't necessarily make sense there. The Kings have a lot of guards. Karis LeVert's not a bad option at all, but the guards aren't necessarily on the priority list for the Kings. They've been looking for wings, and they've been looking for guys to fill those 3-4 spots and maybe even play the 5 like Domantas Sabonis can. So let's start with the star in Sabonis. If the Kings were to offer any kind of package for, actually, I'm going to back up really quick. I want to get, before we dive into the players specifically, looking at the Kings roster, what players do you think the Indiana Pacers would have interest in? And are they trying to acquire NBA caliber, like ready day one, make an impact talent? Are they looking for draft picks? What is Indiana really looking here?
That's the difficulty in assessing a lot of what the Pacers will do next sort of talks is, I get that the headline of the story said rebuild, but given what has become after that, given what we know of the Pacers' history for all of time, given what we know of Rick Carlisle, I think retool is a more apt word. And I think that under the guise of retooling around Chris Duarte, whatever big they pick, and Brogdon, who they can't trade this year, makes a lot more sense given where the team is at, given where they are financially, just given their whole situation. So that's the word I've been using. And how I would assess what they need is, does this player fit around Duarte? Because I understand that you have other vets that will be good and on the team after that, but he is really good already. And he is the guy who's going to be on this team most likely the longest of anyone on the roster right now. He was mentioned specifically in the Athletic piece about someone they want to build around. So I think that both vets and young players and picks all have their own appeal in separate ways. It just depends on what the return is, right? Because when you're retooling, you're okay with getting good stuff back. Like they would maybe be receptive to Harrison Barnes, who played well under Rick Carlisle in Dallas before, but they would also maybe be receptive to young guys who are really talented. And the Kings are in one of the unique teams, there are a few in the league like this, that have young guys and picks, all their picks, and decent vets that could help. So the Kings are in a unique spot where they have the stuff that could match what the Pacers want. The question is, do the Pacers actually want it, and what makes sense? What is the offer?
This episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Shopify. In case you don't know, Shopify is a complete commerce platform that lets you start, grow, and manage a business. The subscription-based software allows anyone to set up an online store and sell their products. Shopify store owners can also sell in physical locations using Shopify POS, which is their point of sale app, and accompanying hardware. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved only for big businesses, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility, and Shopify helps you make your entrepreneurial dreams come true. They make it a lot easier, truth be told. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed, from down the street to around the globe. Shopify powers over 1.7 million businesses from first sale to full scale, reaching customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integration and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. It allows you to gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. There's really nothing that Shopify can't do. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. That's shopify.com/lockedonnba. Locked On Kings also brought to you by TrueBill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam to get your money out of you without you realizing it. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download TrueBill to take control of your subscriptions. TrueBill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions that you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with TrueBill. I personally haven't saved that much, but I've saved a boatload instantly just by canceling subscriptions that I completely forgot that I had. Look, there's so many subscription services now. It's very easy to forget that you're sending $10 a month over here, $5 a month over here. And TrueBill, instead of having to go and sift through all your credit card and bank statements, TrueBill puts it right there for you. And with one tap of a button, you can cancel any unwanted subscriptions that you have. Companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. TrueBill makes it incredibly simple. And your TrueBill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. TrueBill has over 2 million users. It's helped them save over $100 million. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. That's TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. Well, so I'm going to mention 4 names here, and you're going to notice 2 who have been left out, and that might jump off the page to you. One of the 4 names you've already mentioned in Harrison Barnes. The others are Buddy Hield, Davion Mitchell, and Marvin Bagley. Those 4 names thinking fit with the Indiana Pacers, interest from the Indiana Pacers. Any of those 4 absolutely ring a bell, and any of those 4 make you go, oh, absolutely not?
Well, if it was 1 week ago today, I would have shot down your Bagley name immediately, but that dude's had the best last 2 games in forever. I mean, he
maybe
actually
his career. Maybe his career,
he's looked
honestly.
actually okay the last 2 times I've tuned into the Kings, so perhaps his value's coming up a little bit. I remember we were talking doing mock trades in the mock draft. I said, I kind of view him as like a neutral value, like nothing guy at this point. He's expiring, doesn't play. I'd still probably have him there, but maybe he's a slight positive, and for a retooling team, that might be appealing. Buddy Hield's a guy that I have often discredited when thinking about how he would fit on the Pacers, but Rick Carlisle likes 3-point attempts. If you have an open 3 on any possession early in the shot clock, he's letting anyone take them. TJ McConnell's taking 3s. Sabonis is taking a lot of 3s. Torrey Craig's taking not a lot of 3s. These guys are taking way more 3s than they ever have before. And it's fine. It kind of works. But, I think he's very receptive to, if you're in the game, I trust you to shoot when you're open, even if it's not necessarily the best shot we'll get on that possession. So Buddy Hield, while I have been not thinking he'd be a great fit on the Pacers in the past, with that sort of encouragement from Carlisle, I do like his fit. Barnes, I already said, yes, has played under him before. And Mitchell is a scrappy, pesky defender. Lotto pick this year. I mean, obviously has a lot of value. Tough to say exactly what he is, only through 1/3 of his first season. And rookie walls come as these guys, they only play 25 games every college season. So him and Duarte both are about to hit that. How many more games do we have? Kind of point of the season. So all 4 of those guys, 3 of those guys have obvious appeal to me from a Pacers perspective. Bagley is a sort of TBD, but that said, their value hasn't just drastically changed because the Pacers' position changed. So it's hard to remedy both of those things, but I think there is potential between these 2 sides this time.
All right, now I'm going to get back to what I was starting earlier with Domantas Sabonis, and I left both De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton out of that player list. Do either of those guys, definitely not both of them, but one of those guys have to be part of the package if the Kings are going to land Sabonis? And is the expectation that the Pacers will be able to get that significant of value for a player of Domantas Sabonis' stature?
So let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. Would you say that Wendell Carter last year has less or more value than Davion Mitchell right now?
Wendell Carter, I would say... Wow, that's a tough question because he played very, very well, and I was actually really impressed with what I saw out of him with the Orlando Magic, and he seems to be coming along. I think the biased Kings in me wants to say Davion Mitchell, but I think I will give the slight edge to Wendell Carter just based off what I've seen.
So the guys I've used for Sabonis trades for a whole year now, since this trade happened, has been Nikola Vucevic to the Bulls, because Vuce is, I think, a tiny bit better than Sabonis, but Sabonis is younger and still growing as a player. He's only 24, 25, right? That seems kind of old. Guys don't improve a ton at that age. And this is where my Pacers coverage bias comes in, because Oladipo turned 25, came to Indiana, and then went nuclear with the new franchise. So I have seen players turn 25 and still develop, whatever. Sabonis is younger than Vooch and about as good. And Vooch last year in that Bulls trade, it was 2 firsts, Wendell Carter and Otto Porter, which was just salary filler.
Right.
So if you view Dave, I think I was expecting you to say about, you said, but I think Davion and Wendell you could say about even. And maybe I would have Davion maybe a little higher. So that's close. So I think if you can find the right salary, it would probably take something like 2 protected-ish, slightly. I forget what the protections are in that. Here it is. It doesn't have the protections in this ESPN article. Well, I forget what the protections were going to Orlando, but something similar to that kind of deal would, to me, be what it takes to get Sabonis to another team. And when you're in the Kings position, I don't want to speak for you, but that seems like a lot for a team that doesn't necessarily have the playoff pieces in place just yet, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, what's interesting here from the Kings' perspective is I'm ready for the Sacramento Kings to make a swing for the fences type move. And if Domantas Sabonis is acquired by the Kings, assuming De'Aaron Fox is not part of that deal, which I don't think the Kings would ever make that deal if De'Aaron was involved. I actually was having a conversation with some radio hosts here in Sacramento a couple days ago about this. Like, is De'Aaron still the best player on this team, or does Domantas Sabonis come in and become the best player on this team? I think they're 1A and 1B in some combination. So I don't think the Kings would be too afraid in that scenario, assuming I know what Monte McNair is trying to do, which is make a swing for the fences move to try and get this team over the hump. I don't think the Kings in that scenario would be too afraid of trading draft picks. Look, Monty's done pretty well in his first 2 drafts, but draft picks have been horrendous for the Sacramento Kings over their history. And they're trying to get to a position where their draft pick isn't a lottery pick any year or every single year anyway. So the idea of trading future firsts, I think the Kings are more open to. And I wonder how much value those future firsts have to other teams around the league who expect the Kings to perpetually have a lottery draft pick. So maybe the Kings want to be a little more protective of this year's pick, assuming they don't make it and they're right around that end of lottery range. But a 2023 first rounder, a 2024 first rounder, I don't think, assuming Monte McNair has the ability to make that move, I don't think trading away those picks scares him too much. So I personally like the idea of a Davion Mitchell salary filler plus a couple protected future firsts for Domantas Sabonis. I know I personally would make that move in a heartbeat just because of my desire to see the Kings do something and make some kind of splash.
I think that would depend on how the Pacers feel about Mitchell, and that kind of trade specifically kind of falls back to your rebuild versus retool thing. If you are rebuilding, that's probably really appealing, right? You got a guy just picked in the lottery plus 2 firsts for your guy. If you're retooling and you'd like to be kind of good now and then have Rick Carlisle develop your team, kind of like he did with the Mavs post-Dirk, pre-Luka, they were only down for about a year and a half. If you're trying to do that, maybe you don't want Mitchell and you want somebody better or something like that. And, the appeal of like Fox and Halliburton obviously is that they're awesome, but that would be like the whole package. They're so good. But Kevin Pritchard and all his big trades for all his time with the Pacers, right? The big guys he's traded for, Paul George for Vic, who had 4 years on his deal, and Sabonis, who had 3 years left on his deal. And then he traded for Warren, who had 3 years left on his deal. He traded for LeVert, who had 3 years left on his deal. Every time he trades for a big name, he likes that they're closer to or in their prime and have a lot of years left on their deal. So that the Kings have a lot of that, but I think that would be an appeal as well for if it's just like a Fox for Sabonis. I don't think the Kings would do that. In fact, if I were the Kings, I would definitely not do that. If Halliburton's included at all, that's like close to it from the Kings, I'm assuming. And he has also got a lot of time left on his deal. So the pieces are there to do any sort of combination of stuff like that, but it kind of depends on what the Pacers want back in terms of build versus tool versus around Duarte kind of stuff.
Yeah, personally, I feel that Davion Mitchell and Harrison Barnes are the highest value players that the Kings would be willing to move on from. Now, they're desperately going to try and move on from Buddy Hield. They're going to be shopping Marvin Bagley, and assuming his value continues to rise with how he's playing recently, that only helps the Kings. So I imagine any trade scenario with any team, not just the Pacers, De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton are off the table unless they're getting a bona fide star. And yes, Domantas Sabonis has been an all-star before. Correct? Am I
twice? Yeah,
twice. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't imagine that. We imagine all-star appearances here in Sacramento, just so you know. I just don't think that is enough, for the Kings to confidently move on from those 2 players. Even if those 2 players haven't established themselves yet as star players themselves, I don't think the Kings should label anybody untouchable when they've been this bad over the course of how many seasons. But the reality is they're going to want to try and see what they can build with Fox and Halliburton going forward, and adding Sabonis to that, I know gives them a potential big 3 that they like for years to come. Well, what about TJ Warren? Because the Kings have lacked wing depth all season long. The Kings historically have had a really tough time filling that wing position. They're very happy with Harrison Barnes, and I've said that I wouldn't move on from Harrison Barnes unless I was getting an absolute cannot refuse type deal because of how important he is for this team and how hard it is to fill that position. But TJ Warren is someone who could come in and fill that position. What kind of package do you think Indiana is looking for, Kings specific and then league wide, I guess, for a player like TJ Warren?
You know who else lacks wing depth?
Pacers?
That'd be the Indiana Pacers, who are starting a guard at the 3, and their backup small forward is Keelan Martin right now, who's playing a bunch of minutes, and he's been fine. But they also lack wing depth. Justin Holiday's out right now. So Warren's kind of important to them, and that's another reason. I didn't say this earlier, but the timing of all this was surprising to me, as we've heard the messaging from the Pacers for so long of, we just want to see this whole team healthy and together. And now we're less than a month away from TJ Warren returning. We're finally going to see this thing that the Pacers have said for so long. We're so excited to see them all play together. Like, never mind. We're ready to change directions. It's like, wait a minute. You're finally so close to this guy you've been clamoring for to show how he can fit with this core, and now you're going to pivot. Warren, I have the hardest time thinking of his value. In the Athletic piece specifically, there was a one-sentence paragraph saying he likes Indianapolis, and he does. David West is one of his best friends who's ever played in the league, played for the Pacers for a long time. They're still close. Warren likes a quieter kind of city, just kind of the guy he is. He's not a big city kind of guy. So he likes Indianapolis. I think he'd be receptive to re-signing here, which makes his value a little higher to the Pacers because he can be a big wing on the next team. And if you are thinking of a retool and the stuff that Carlisle likes, guys who can dribble and shoot, guys who can defend, TJ Warren is those things. So I think his value is high from that perspective, but the opposite perspective is he hasn't played a basketball game in a year. We have no idea what he's going to be when he returns to the court to play. We have no idea how he fits with this team, and for a team that's thinking of retooling, you would like to know that information. So I'm not going to lie, Matt, I have no idea how to value TJ Warren in a trade, and I don't even know if they're considering moving him because of all those factors. Like, he's extension eligible. Maybe he comes out and he looks good, and they're like, yep, here's a piece of paper, sign this. So I don't know what they'd be thinking there. I think if the offer was right, they would take it because they're willing to shake things up anyway. But I think that he's the kind of a guy, just given his skill and fit and desire to be in this market, that they would actually like to keep, and he fits the way Rick Carlisle likes to play. So it's kind of offer dependent. That was a lot of words to say. I don't know.
Today's Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Stance. Founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel with a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity. I threw out almost all of my socks and have replaced them with Stance socks. They're so comfortable. They're warm. They just feel right. Honestly, half the time they don't even feel there. They feel really comfortable in my shoes, and spending all day on my feet half the time, they are able to make sure I stay comfortable, don't experience any kind of foot pain. Stance is wonderful, a sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity. They bring an atypical aesthetic alongside some of pop culture's hottest collaborations for the ultimate in style and self-expression, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than just fitting in, and those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com. You can get 15% off your first purchase. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. I personally feel that the interest in TJ Warren from Sacramento might be halted or might not be as strong as it would have been because of the fact that he hasn't played and there are the unknowns of what he's going to be when he comes back, because the Kings are looking to acquire talent that is going to get them over the hump and make not just an immediate impact, but a significant immediate impact. And we know TJ Warren is capable of making that, but will he? Can he? And would you be willing to trade a guy like Harrison Barnes, who is impactful on your team, for that risk? I don't think that's in the cards. Truth be told, I think if the Kings are calling the Indiana Pacers, they're going to call aggressively about Domantas Sabonis first and foremost. There might be interest, though, in Caris LeVert, although there are so many guards on this Kings roster. Of course, you can move on to some guards to acquire him, and at 6'6", I guess you could play him at the 3 if you want to move Harrison Barnes down to the 4. And I have seen some hypothetical trade scenarios discussing just a straight up, and I don't know financially if this works, but just a straight up Caris LeVert for Buddy Hield type swap. What do you think about the idea of that and the kind of value that Indiana would want for LeVert?
That's close to legal. I maybe have to throw a minimum in on the Pacers side as well to make that work, but that's pretty close. Yeah, LeVert is another guy that I have some trouble gauging his value, which I need to come more prepared with, like exactly this and exactly this. But he was awesome for them last year. Scored 26 points per game in their last 10 games, was kicking out to shooters all the time, was a big reason they had this late surge. They went 34 and 38. They never really surged. But basically every game after the Pacers lost to the Kings at home, and there was the Goga Batadze, Greg Foster spat that Kings fans all saw, LeVert was excellent and was a big part of their success. And then this year he had a ton of back pain in the offseason and was held out for a really long time before the season started. And when he came back to playing, very obviously not 100%, like standing more upright, his form was a little jank. So then they ratcheted down his minutes. He missed a few more games. Just recently, like right now, is the closest he's been to 100%. He's finally playing over 30 minutes per game in some games again. So he's been kind of bad this year, and I think that has to hurt his value. Last year, they traded Vic for him and 2 second-round picks. Depot ended up getting hurt and then being traded for like nothing. So it's really hard to assess what the original trade was for him and what he's worth now. I think Buddy plus like a thingy of something would be nice, would be like what I would consider appropriate, but maybe LeVert's value is lower than that because of how poor he started the season. That's why I have a little trouble assessing his value, but that doesn't seem too far apart to me, just given how he struggled this year. They just have different skill sets, which makes them hard to totally compare.
In terms of Miles Turner, who I do really like, just from your mind, your understanding of Rashawn Holmes as a player, if they were to acquire him, unless he's either playing backup center behind Rashawn or you're trying to make it work with him at the 4, what do you think about the possibility of Miles Turner playing next to a mainly paint scorer, pick and roll, not really floor spacer big in Rashawn Holmes? Could that work? And do you agree with me that there's probably not too much interest there?
It's not awful. The thing about Turner is because he can space the floor, he's over 40% from 3 this season. Because he can space the floor, he can kind of fit offensively with anybody, but he just quoted on the record in The Athletic in this story saying, I want a bigger role than that. Like, I'm tired of being that role player who stands in the corner. So yes, I think he can do more than that, but on the Kings, I don't think he would do more than that. So offensively, I think him and Holmes would fit. Defensively, there'd be some issues because neither of them have quite the foot speed away from the paint, and one of them would be the 4 by default if they played together. So he's not a bad fit with like any center to me because he's talent, just because he's good, right? And he has unique skills for a big, but he is an awkward fit with centers who are either slower or don't have any range. And Holmes isn't necessarily like slow, but definitely some fit issues with those two. So yes, I agree with you.
Finally, Tony, how quick do you expect the Pacers to try and move on these deals? Do you think they'll be patient and wait till the very end of the deadline to make sure they're getting maximum value or getting the deals that they want? Are they looking to move quickly, as in if the Kings and other teams start calling right away and trying to get a deal done here at the end of December or before the turn of the new year, or even early on in 2022, the Pacers would jump for that? What do you think about their level of aggressiveness to make these moves happen?
I think that, well, in general, Pritchard's been a patient guy. Like the Paul George trade stuff took like over a month, and the Vic stuff went on for a whole summer. Didn't even get traded. He only ended up getting traded when he did because James Harden got traded, and the Pacers were able to slide into that as a third team to get the value they wanted out of Oladipo then. Like, he is typically Pritchard, what he likes to do. This is an analogy, not this specifically, but he's got his whiteboard with all of his offers, and he likes to constantly mull over which of those is the best as the dynamic situations change. So one, and you know this, I'm sure you've talked about this at some point on your show, most trades in the NBA can't even happen until the 15th of this month anyway, as those because of the contract rules, right? So nothing will happen immediately. And maybe the end of the month when some more deals can get moved, something will happen. But there's also the January 15th date when even more deals can get moved, and everybody basically in the league is trade eligible at that point. And that's when any offer can come in. And like, there are a few guys that are not on the Kings, but there are a few guys around the league that could apply to, that they could be on the table for the Pacers to get. So I think that January 15th, once every team can make their formal best offer, is kind of when things, if they were to speed up, will really heat up for trade talks from the Pacers.
Well, Tony, don't be surprised at all to see the Kings and Pacers involved in some rumors. I think the Kings should be involved in almost any rumor out there if there's a player with talent available that can potentially help this team. And if anything does go down, of course, if both these teams make a trade, we'll have to reconvene and discuss that trade, who won, who lost, and how both teams look going forward. I appreciate you taking the time, my man. I know you're a very popular host right now with everybody calling you want to try and fleece the Pacers. I promise you, I'm trying to make a good gentleman's agreement here. No fleecing going on, but I appreciate you taking the time, my man. And we'll chat hopefully very soon.
Perhaps the best way to describe the value of these players, Matt, already done Locked On Mavs, going to do Locked On Raptors. All these teams want Pacers players, so come with your best offers, Kings.
Big thank you to Tony for joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast. He really is a busy guy right now. And now I'm curious if you liked what he and I had to discuss. Would you pull the trigger on a package for Domantas Sabonis if Davion Mitchell was the main piece that you were sending back? Are you interested in Karis LeVert, Miles Turner, TJ Warren? Let me know at Matt George Sack on Twitter. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts down in the comment section down below if you're watching on YouTube. Following the Kings game against the Charlotte Hornets, we, of course, will be back for a post-game episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. So I hope that you'll join me for that. As trade rumors continue, we'll do more episodes like this on Locked On Kings as the trade deadline gets closer and closer. And like I said to Tony, don't be surprised at all to see the Kings involved in a lot of trade rumors and trade conversations, hypothetical trade conversations over the course of the next few months, because I believe Monte McNair is trying to be aggressive. He's waiting for opportunities like what's happening in Indiana right now to pounce. If he can find the right deal, I expect he and the Kings to pull the trigger. So can't wait for you to join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings, whether it's a post-game episode, a trade deadline episode. We always have you covered. Appreciate your support. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.